Before we begin, I just wanted to mention ACEEE is a nonprofit that acts as a catalyst to advance energy efficiency policies, programs, technologies, investments, and behaviors. And you can read more about our work on aceeee.org. I would also like to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Today we're joined by Dan York. Dan York is a senior fellow engaged primarily in utilities and local policy research and technical assistant here at ACEEE. He focuses on trends and emerging issues in the utility sector and energy efficiency programs. He joined ACEEE in 2001. We also have Alexandra Jara. He's the local policy research assistant at ACEEE. Alex assists with research on the local policy team and contributes to the City Clean Energy Scorecard. And he joined ACEEE in 2019. We also have Rocky Mould. He's the Energy Program Manager at the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency of the City and County of Honolulu. Rocky utilizes experience in energy, economics, and financial analysis to help the city plan, prioritize, and implement the energy component of its resilience and sustainability policies and programs. And last, we have Martina Reno. She's the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer of the Autonomous City of Buenos Aires. Martina has experience working at the national and city level in the city of Argentina, as well as international development experience. Before working on the resilience team in Buenos Aires, she worked at the Secretariat of Civil Protection, Emergencies, and Catastrophes of the Argentinian national government. I'm now going to pass it on to Dan York.
Okay. Thanks, Maxine. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Alex and I will be providing highlights of a review of resilience plans from an international set of 66 cities participating in the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative. Today, we're releasing a research report on this work, which is available on ACEEE's website for downloading for complete information on this review. This is just pretty high-level overview of what we're doing. Next slide, please. Our interest in research objectives stem from related work that ACEEE has done over the past several years. Here are our main goals. We wanted to follow up our 2015 report that laid a foundation for the importance of including clean energy initiatives within city resilience planning. And with the availability of resilience plans through the 100 resilient cities, we had the opportunity to review a set of plans to identify the extent that clean energy initiatives are included. And then finally, we wanted to drill down a bit, and present examples of cities that have robust clean energy initiatives included in their plans. Specifically, what are they doing to meet those resilience objectives? Next slide, please. So the resilience benefits of energy efficiency and renewable energy span a variety of critical issues for cities. They both can support electrical grids and improve system reliability. Renewable energy especially can provide backup power during outages. And during outages, more efficient buildings, because of their more efficient thermal shell, can help maintain livable indoor conditions for longer periods, whether hot or cold. And then transportation also is a critical function within cities by providing multiple transportation modes. That's often done for resilience and sustainability benefits that can improve mobility and allow readily transportation over the course of emergencies. And then more broadly, energy efficiency and renewable energy support stronger local economies, address public health, and can also help mitigate climate change impacts. Next one, please. And from our review, we tallied the number of initiatives targeted at various stresses and shocks of concern for resilience, those things that you city planners are all worried about, and the rest of us too, for that matter. And as you can see on this graph, climate change far outweighs all other concerns that were raised during these resilience plans, and it's the primary driver for clean energy initiatives within those plans. It really was just dominant among all these other things that you see there, from poor air quality, traffic congestion, earthquakes, energy insecurity. So climate change is clearly top of everyone's list. All right, next one, please. And some of the common energy efficiency initiatives include really are under three overarching areas: transportation, building energy efficiency, and grid backups. So for transportation, encouraging sustainable modes, targeting transit-oriented development and efficiency strategies, increasing electric vehicles. For building energy efficiency, there's benchmarking, audits of buildings, retrofits, building codes. Fuel switching and electrification is coming out as another strategy, especially as grids are becoming cleaner and greener, and improving the efficiency of municipal buildings, kind of leading by example. And then grid backups, developing microgrids can help support the overall grid. Next slide, please. And then some renewable energy initiatives. Again, this really comes down to two ways to get renewable energy: either put the pressure on suppliers of electricity to a city from utilities, or produce your own. So you see different initiatives there that can be taken to increase reliance on renewable supplies. And finally, next slide. We also looked at energy and transportation equity, in recognition that energy equity and reducing energy burdens and making clean energy affordable for all are also integral to many resilience plans. And we identified three cities that especially stood out for addressing equity there: Athens, Greece, Chicago, and Toronto. And I'll now hand it off to Alex, who's going to describe more of our results and the analysis. And again, the full details, we encourage you to check out that report. Alex?
Thanks, Dan. We rated the extent to which cities incorporated clean energy initiatives into their resilience plans. For both energy efficiency and renewable energy, city plans could earn the following ratings: exemplary, substantial, adequate, and lacking. But what do these ratings mean practically? It means that cities that earned an exemplary rating typically made the corresponding resource integral to their strategy and planned on pursuing an array of energy efficiency or renewable energy policies as a means to bolster city resilience. Cities that earned a substantial rating made clean energy of relative importance. Cities that received an adequate rating are doing something that relates to clean energy to resilience, but clean energy more or less falls by the wayside in their plans. Cities that earned a lacking rating include very few clean energy actions or none at all. In addition, we assess whether cities include actions to remedy energy and transportation inequities in their plans. Cities that collected data on these inequities and developed initiatives to correct them earned an active rating. Those that did one but not both received a passive rating. Jumping into our overall findings, 4 city plans earned an exemplary rating for energy efficiency, and another 4 city plans earned an exemplary rating for renewable energy. Further, 11 and 9 city plans earned a substantial rating for energy efficiency and renewable energy and resilience planning, respectively. 39 cities earned an adequate rating for energy efficiency and 32 cities for renewable energy, while 12 cities earned lacking ratings for efficiency and 21 for renewables. These findings suggest that the majority of the resilience plans we reviewed include clean energy initiatives into their resilience plans, but the depth and breadth of clean energy initiatives varies. Cities that earned an exemplary rating or substantial rating can also serve as examples for cities that may currently be developing their resilience plan on the types of clean energy initiatives to include. 6 cities received exemplary ratings for the inclusion of energy efficiency and renewable energy in their resilience plans. 2 cities, Honolulu and New York, earned exemplary ratings for both energy efficiency and renewable energy. They were the only 2 cities to do so. Joining Honolulu and New York on the energy efficiency side were Athens, Greece, and Buenos Aires, while Chicago and Los Angeles joined Honolulu and New York for renewable energy and resilience planning. Martina and Rocky will expand on the efforts of their cities, but Athens, among other initiatives, seeks to convert 20% of homes that use diesel as a heating source to natural gas. The city also plans to convert 10% of the residential housing stock to net zero energy to to protect the city from climate change and extreme heat. Athens also had one of the most extensive set of initiatives aimed at addressing energy inequity. The city plans on establishing an energy observatory that would monitor energy inequity within the city and deliver energy efficiency solutions. In the same vein, Athens plans to create building energy passports, which provide detailed, step-by-step energy efficiency measures for individual buildings. New York plans to expand bicycle lanes by 200 miles, retrofit every municipal building with significant energy use, and implement existing policies such as their building, benchmarking, and audit requirements. Los Angeles plans on replacing 70% of its existing power supply with clean energy resources within 15 years, while Chicago plans to use 100% renewables and encourage anchor institutions to subscribe to community solar. In addition to highlighting those cities that are in exemplary ratings, I'd like to highlight other cities around the world whose plans are in substantial ratings. In the Americas, these include Atlanta, Chicago, the Greater Miami region, the Santiago metropolitan area, and Washington, D.C. for energy efficiency. The Santiago metropolitan area plans on encouraging multimodal transportation by building 400 kilometers of bike lanes and pursuing a robust complete streets policy as a means to reduce transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions. On the renewable energy side, Atlanta, Berkeley, Rio de Janeiro, San Francisco, and the Santiago metropolitan area all receive substantial ratings for renewable energy. Berkeley plans on creating a series of solar plus storage microgrids throughout the city as a means to protect against climate change and extreme weather events. Starting from the top window, Surat earned a substantial rating for renewable energy based on efforts to encourage solar energy uptake in the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors. In Europe and West Asia, energy efficiency leaders include Athens, Rome, and Veg, and renewable energy leaders include Amman and Ramallah. In West and South Africa, Dakar and Accra both earned substantial ratings for energy efficiency. Dakar plans to undertake soft retrofits of commercial buildings to reduce energy demand and shield against power outages that plague the city, whereas Accra plans to create a green building certification program, retrofit streetlights with LEDs, and develop an energy workforce that would be responsible for administering both initiatives. And finally, in Oceania, Wellington earned a substantial rating for energy efficiency. The city planned on investigating ways to incorporate energy efficiency strategies such as double glazing, improved insulation, and better ventilation into earthquake retrofits for residential homes. Wellington also planned on increasing electric vehicle uptake to shield the city from fuel supply disruptions in the event of an earthquake. Moving forward, we developed the following recommendations. Cities can expand and strengthen on the initiatives in their plans. They can learn from other cities and adapt effective measures within their local context. Luckily, there are several examples from around the world. And cities can seek to understand the energy equity issues relevant to their city and adopt remedying policies and programs. And with that, I'll turn it back to Maxine.
Well, thank you, Alex. So up next is Rocky Mold, and he's going to discuss what is happening in Honolulu. Rocky?
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to join in this webinar. Again, my name is Rocky Mold. I'm the Energy Program Manager for the City and County of Honolulu, our Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Next slide, please. I'm going to start off by providing a little bit of context for our city, and I really love this picture. This is a picture because it really encompasses a lot of what the City and County of Honolulu has and deals with. This shows a shot of Waikiki looking across our southern shore all the way over to the Waianae Mountains on our western side. And a lot of what we're trying to do is sort of bring that western side together with our urban core in a sustainable, clean, and resilient manner. Next slide, please. So, City and County of Honolulu, it's really important to put us in the context of an island. We are, and if you look along the southern shore of the island there, that's really most of where our urban core is, most of where our business activity and people live. You can see Pearl Harbor there in the middle, and to the right of that, our airport and main downtown area. Essentially, we try to get people to those areas during the day. Next slide, please. It's also important to note that we are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and we are very isolated. The city and county of Honolulu makes up one island in the Hawaiian island chain. We're part of 4 counties here. There's a county of Kauai, Maui, and the Big Island, Hawaii Island, all the way to the right. But it's really, the fact that we're so isolated really creates significant challenges for us in terms of energy security, in terms of energy supply, economics, as well as resiliency and preparedness. Next slide, please. So the city itself, we are about 70% of the state of Hawaii's total population, 980,000 people, just under 1 million. We get a lot of visitors. We get, as of 2018, we get about 5.9 million visitor arrivals a year. What that means is really on any given day in the city and county of Honolulu, we have about 1.1 million people on island. And actually, as I mentioned before, we're fairly urban. For U.S. cities, we rank 7th for having the most number of buildings over 328 feet tall. And then, we rank first for a number of percentage of workers who carpool to work and 7th in public transportation. Next slide, please. And again, we are very isolated. The closest point on the U.S. continent, on the North American continent to us is California, 2,390 miles away. And then Japan is about 3,850 miles away. And we have a lot of connections to Asia. We're sort of here in the middle of the Pacific and sort of connecting between, the Pacific Islands, but also Asia and the United States. Believe it or not, City and County of Honolulu also actually has jurisdiction over the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So on a geographic basis, we're actually the largest municipality in the country officially. But the island itself is only about 600 square miles, and we are the 11th largest municipality in the country in terms of within our bounds. And again, tourism is our primary principal industry, but we also get a lot of government and federal spending that comes here, along with some agricultural experts. Next slide, please. So I'm part of this new Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. We were actually created by voters in a charter mandate in the 2016 election. The 2016 election called for a chief resilience officer, and then we created an office. The mayor of Honolulu, Kurt Caldwell, created an office around that. And really our job is to green city operations, to promote resilient communities, to ensure that sustainability is throughout city plans and policies, and that's one of my primary roles, and to reduce the impacts of climate change, and to coordinate with federal agencies. In that same charter, we also created a climate change commission, and that consists of 5 commissioners who consult and provide expertise to city government on how to deal with climate change. And they're really from the academic community along with the business and building community. Next slide, please. And we are, there's a shot of the organizational structure of the City and County of Honolulu. And so we are part of the Managing Director's office, which is part of the Mayor's office. So we are mostly appointed officials, and one of our, but we are established in, as a department. But one of our, roles here is to try to really institutionalize us within this infrastructure and to build links and bridges with all of these other departments, particularly the departments of design and construction, where we're working really closely with to develop renewable energy and energy efficiency policies, Department of Emergency Management, who we're working with to become better prepared for disasters and hurricanes and whatnot. And really on down, we work with all these departments to instill sustainability and resilience and mitigating the impacts of climate change throughout city government. Next slide, please. At the same time as the creation of our office in 2016, the City and County of Honolulu won a grant award from the Rockefeller Foundation to become a 100 resilient city. And really with that support, we were able to really supercharge a resilient strategy process. And of course, we define resilience really as the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems to survive, adapt, and thrive no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. So this is really about preparing our island not only for a big hit from a storm or an economic shock, but it's also about building us stronger to the longer term stressors that are really deteriorating quality of life or the ability to thrive and promote well-being. Next slide, please. So again, it's about responding to acute shocks, such as increased storm activity and economic contagion, things like this. And of course, here on Oahu in the middle of the Pacific, this is really important to us. We took notice of Hurricane Maria and Irma in the Caribbean, as well as sort of the recent ones, and really we're starting to build bridges and learn from those experiences how to become more resilient to the increased storms we're seeing from climate change. Next slide, please. And again, chronic stresses, these are, chronic stress. This is like, poverty, endemic violence, inadequate transportation, aging infrastructure. You saw that list that Dan York showed before of things that folks were worried about. And that certainly came up on, our list when we went out to the community to find out what kind of shocks and stresses that they were most worried about. Really, storms was hurricanes and tsunamis really was our number one concern from a community basis, but also the aging infrastructure and climate change was throughout all of it. Next slide, please. And when we talk about clean energy, really it's about tackling mitigating the long-term cause of climate change, which is greenhouse gas emissions. And so, one of my main jobs here at City and County of Honolulu is to develop policies to mitigate carbon emissions. And of course, we're globally we're dumping about 110 millions of global warming pollution in the atmosphere every 24 hours. So this is the challenge that we face on a long-term basis. Next slide, please. And of course, the science is clear. Global temperatures are on the rise as a result of global heating. Really, it's about addressing that. Next slide, please. And this is causing, this is a graph of, worldwide extreme weather events and catastrophes. And you can just see since 1980, we've gone from about 200 to about 700. So, I mean, again, the science is clear, and we've got to do something to address that. Next slide. And of course, out here on an island in the middle of the Pacific in the tropics, we're starting to see these local changes and feel these local changes already. The trade winds that we have really have been a natural cooling system for Hawaii for centuries. We're seeing those trade wind days being reduced overall. We're seeing less overall rain, and we're actually in drought conditions. And of course, there's the issues of sea level rise. And that picture there that you see is a king tide. We get these new really high these new events where really it becomes a perfect storm where you have a full moon with a king tide. And with climate change, we're starting to see infrastructure impacts, and that's a shot of our main tourist beach at Waikiki there. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we're also seeing record heat. And this is sort of newly popped up onto our radar as a significant concern that we're going to have to deal with in Honolulu. Just this last year, we were off the charts in terms of breaking records for heat days. And not only that, we also have these record rainstorms that hit us as well. We're seeing just really volatile weather. Global weirding is a term that gets thrown around a lot here and used a lot here. But these are the things. This is the new context under which we're dealing when we do city planning. Next slide, please. So one of our main activities is we committed to the Paris Climate Agreement. Mayor Kirk Caldwell, along with the other mayors and the governor of Hawaii, committed to staying in the Paris Climate Agreement in 2017. And what that means is developing a climate action plan. And so as part of the office, we really led that effort for the city and went out to the community. This issue of sort of equity is really important, and they mentioned it earlier, ACEEE. We're really trying to build our plans with community support from the ground up, from the grassroots up, and really open a dialogue with the community as we're making these plans. And so we went out to each of our 9 council member districts, co-hosted by a council member across Oahu, as well as our 2 main academic institutions. And we created a greenhouse gas emissions simulation game, how to reduce emissions to our 100% renewable energy goal. And we took the inputs from that game and integrated that into our climate action planning. Next slide, please. And of course, we have part of climate action planning is taking a measure of where you are. And of course, the goal of this is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in our energy and building and transportation sectors, as well as other areas. But in order to do that, you really have to get a gauge of where you are. So we went out and through support from ICLEI, we were able, along with the 4 counties, to get to do our greenhouse gas inventories based on the global community scale protocol for cities. And so we have this is a look at our 2017 greenhouse gas inventory, which we're updating on a yearly basis. But it shows we have about 15.9 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions this year, and you'll see, the major portion of that is coming from residential and commercial energy, commercial industrial energy, and this is really our buildings energy, as well as on-road transportation. It's really, those are the areas that we've identified as really having the ability to make, to address low-hanging fruit community-wide as well as at the city. Next slide, please. And this shows progress over time from 2005. 2005 is our base year as per the Paris Climate Agreement. And it just shows we made really good progress in our, through energy efficiency, through renewable energy, adding it to our grid. But as you can see, you can never let down. From 2016 to 2017, we actually ticked up a little bit in our inventory. And so really, you have to stay vigilant. Even though we're making great progress on our grid, we still have a long way to go. We can't lose sight of that. Next slide, please. And of course, overarching all of this is, through that support from the Rockefeller Foundation, we developed our resilience strategy. And as you'll see later, climate security and clean energy is really a featured part of this resilience strategy. Ola is a Hawaiian word that means well-being, living, thriving, and healthy. But it also connotes salvation, healing, and survival. And this is really the message we wanted for our resilience strategy. Next slide, please. Similar to our climate action planning, we went on a major community outreach initiative to really develop the meat of our resilience strategy. We went out and got over 2,200 surveys from residents across a variety of different, sectors and demographics. We did we did every single neighborhood board meeting and presented and gathered information through a survey. And we had, about 219, stakeholder meetings and different groups within civil society, whether it be a Rotary Club or or a neighborhood board or a business that wanted to invite us in. We tried to speak to everyone. And on a scale of 1 to 10, they ranked us at a 3.9 in terms of how resilient they thought Oahu was today. So we have our work cut out for us. Next slide, please. And through that process, we came to really 4 community resilience pillars that we needed to develop. And we developed 44 specific resilience actions that correlated with these 4 main pillars. And I'll go through those right now real quick. The third one from the left, climate security, that's really where we have our clean energy policies in our resilience strategy. But actually, energy and is throughout a lot of these other pillars. So I'll go through a few of the resilience actions within these pillars now. Next slide, please. So remaining rooted is really about improving affordability and the cost of reducing the cost of living for residents on Oahu. What we're noticing, like many jurisdictions in many cities, we have a lot of money coming in, a lot of investment coming in our tourism industry, and it's causing upward pressure on real estate prices, and it's pricing a lot of people out of the market. We've actually seen reductions in population over the last few years, which is really a worrisome sign from a resilience standpoint for any jurisdiction. Next slide, please. And you'll see there's if you want to go back later, those strategies are listed by by each pillar. So one of the main, in remaining rooted, we know that our permitting process, not just for building housing, but for doing renewable energy projects, et cetera, needed to be worked on. So we identified that as the action 6 in our resilience strategy, and really we're trying to reduce the permitting time. And that's been a lot of my work, in interfacing with renewable energy efficiency developers, and our permitting department has been a big part of my job. Next slide, please. Our action 7 is actually, building transparency. This is basically a common sense measure that says that utility costs should be transparent when, at the time of sale of a home. Next slide, please. I know we're getting short on time, so I'll run through these very quickly. One of the big measures that we're doing right now is we're doing the new land use ordinance, Bill 2, before our council right now, which we had a big part in developing with our Department of Planning and Permitting. We really want to promote new modes of transportation, and we want to take away parking minimum requirements and unbundle parking. And a lot of studies have shown how costly parking is and how it just sets up all the wrong incentives for getting people out of cars and into new modes of transport, such as public transit, walking, biking, etc. And so we are, in the midst of promoting this policy at City Council. Next slide, please. Bouncing forward, this is really how we are preparing ourselves for natural disasters. As I mentioned before, one of the number one concerns of our community is our vulnerability to tropical storms. And with climate change, we're seeing the increased intensity and increased frequency of climate storms. And so, this bouncing forward is really about addressing that. And if you could, next slide, please. And updating our building codes is a really big initiative of the office to address not just climate, not just the buildings and hurricanes, but also our energy code and our electrical code. And this has been right now before our council is Bill 25, which is our energy code update. And in that energy code update, we have added a couple measures. One is a PV and ready homes measure, and another is a solar hot water measure to promote using the sun to heat our water. But then we also have an EV readiness provision that says that 25% of newly constructed parking must be EV charger ready at a level 2 standard. So this is a really big, important measure of ours. Next slide, please. And climate security, as I mentioned, this is really where most of our clean energy policies are contained in our resilience strategy. And this is about reducing emissions, which is my sort of main responsibility here, but also adapting to the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. And really one of our featured policies here is we want to use energy performance contracts to maximize renewable energy and energy efficiency on all of our buildings and facilities. And we actually have two RFPs about to go out. We've been working very diligently on this, and we want to really use this vehicle, the energy performance contract, to really leverage third-party funds to develop renewable energy on our facilities. Next slide, please. We're also in the process of establishing an energy benchmarking standard for all of not just commercial but multifamily residential buildings. This is we recently won a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies, and this was one of the featured commitments that we made when we received the grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies. And we actually now have a climate advisor who's funded through this program, who's helping us on this and other measures. Next slide, please. And we're in the process of developing a district cooling, seawater air conditioning in the city, and that's the current project that is ongoing, and we're looking at the developer and becoming an anchor tenant on this project, hopefully. Next slide, please. Of course, we're looking to tap our wastewater, the methane that's created from our wastewater and land use. We own those assets, and we want to tap the methane that comes from that and use it beneficially in our system to help reduce our reliance on imported fuel and develop clean energy sources. Next slide. And then we're expanding our electric vehicle charging network, and this is actually part of the energy performance contracts. We've spec'd this in there, and we're doubling at least our electric chargers at citywide. Next slide, please. And we want to promote new modes of transportation. So we have a new bike share program that's been extremely successful, and we have transit-oriented development where we're really going to look to managing our curbs to allow for car share as well as more bike share options, and really designing our new rail line that we're putting in, which is our largest project in state history. We really want to manage, get people using the train and getting them out of cars and using new modes of transportation. Next slide. And of course, we want to make it more equitable for people to access new modes of transportation. So we're looking at it. There was a trade and replace program in California that allowed folks to get credits to swap out of their older, dirtier cars and into higher efficiency EVs and hybrids. And so we're in the process of looking at that program and how we can support that. Next slide. And this is the last one in climate security. We've made a commitment to transform 100% of our public fleet to renewable fuel. As I mentioned, we have a new rail line that we're putting in, which is the largest project in state history. Plus, we're also planning to have all of our buses, our transit buses, 100% renewable by 2035. So we're in the process of doing the plans to really rearrange all of our routes so that buses can charge during the day to get the abundant solar resource that there is during the day. And next slide, please. And finally, this is the last pillar of our resilience strategy. We realize that this is community cohesion is a strength that we can build on, and so everything we do is really comes from this angle of how we can pull together, how we can go out to the community and have a two-way dialogue with the community in terms of planning going forward. So with that, I will end. Thank you very much for the time.
Thanks very much, Rocky. We're now going to move on to Martina's presentation. Martina?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me in this webinar. I'll try to, the idea of this presentation is to have a quick overview of the resilient strategy of Buenos Aires and to dig a little bit more into the actions or the projects that are specifically related with energy and mobility in the city. So next slide, please. All right, so the city of Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, was selected by the 100 Resilient Cities Network back in 2016 to be part of the 100 Resilience Initiative. The city entered in the third cohort to the program, and the objective, as Honolulu mentioned, was to build a resilience strategy for the city. The idea was to develop a plan, a strategy that was embedded in the strategic plans of the city, but with a specific eye on resilience. And as I will show during my presentation, we understood resilience in Buenos Aires not just related with climate change or catastrophic events, but also the strategy of the city is a strategy that looks very closely to the people and to their day-to-day life. So just as a big overview, Buenos Aires is a 3 million inhabitant city. We are the capital of Argentina, as I mentioned, and we have another 3 million people that come every day to the city from the metro area. So we are 3 million that sleep in the city, but we are 6 million during the day. Next slide, please. So how did we build a resilient strategy for Buenos Aires? Basically, we divided the process in 3 main steps. We first did a diagnosis to understand what the problems and the main challenges that the city was facing. For doing this diagnosis, what we did was to review all the plan that the city has, 1,800 projects. We did many neighbors survey to understand what the people needs were. We did about 50 interviews to hire city officers, but also to international agencies, NGOs, the private sector, because the resilience strategy is important to understand that even if it's an initiative that is promoted by the city government, it's a strategy for the city and for the person and the people that live the city every day. And we also did some 8 focus groups particular to understand the most vulnerable people. We have 4 very big slums in the city, and the idea was to reach that population to understand their needs. Once we understood the needs and the main challenges that the city were facing, what we did was to dig more into each of these areas that I will show you in a little while. And what we did was to basically build thematic workshops, very similar to what the County of Honolulu did, to involve citizen participation and to co-create initiatives. So the idea of the resilience strategy is first to show what the city is doing, but also to show what we are planning to do and to co-create and to think of innovative and quite innovative solutions to the challenges that we were facing. We also did, this is an interesting thing, we did some resilience pilots during the development phase. That is, we started a little bit earlier our implementation phase. The idea was to show, to materialize resilience, because sometimes when we approach the neighbors or even now the city officers, what we were seeing was that resilience was not understood in the same way for every person. So what we did was to implement and to materialize resilience, to show resilience in the ground. And we finally launched our strategy in September 2018. We built a resilience council, and the strategy was validated by every area and by every high officer in the city. Next slide, please. So this is the vision of the Buenos Aires resilience strategy. As I was mentioning, it's not only focused on climate change and climate-related events, disaster or catastrophes that the city might live, but also it has a very important vision regarding talent, regarding youth, regarding the promotion of equity and diversity. So the strategy is organized into 5 pillars and 3 cross-cutting themes, and we have 60 initiatives. So next slide, please. So here you can see the organization of the strategy. As I was mentioning, it's the first resilience strategy that has a specific focus on gender issues. It's a theme that the city really wants to move forward. And the pillar that I will look at more in detail in this presentation is environment and sustainability. And we also have a pillar, a very important pillar regarding social and urban integration. As I was mentioning, Buenos Aires has very big slums right in the center of the city, and what we're trying to do from the city government and the municipality is to formalize, I would say, these informal settlements to bring services and a better quality, a better life quality for the inhabitants. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you know, climate change is impacting like in every city in the world, particularly in Buenos Aires. We are exposed to 2 big shocks, I would say. First, heat waves. As you can see, this slide is in Spanish, sorry about that, but as you can see, heat waves they multiplied by 3 in the last decade. A heat wave is when we have more than 3 days with more than 30 degrees Celsius. That's around 86 Fahrenheit. And the other event that we're exposed to in Buenos Aires is rainfall, heavy rainfall and floods. So rainfalls are being more intense. We have more water that is falling in a shorter amount of time. And what the graph is showing is that the rainfalls are not homogeneous in the city and in its metro area. Next slide, please. So from the city of Buenos Aires, we have already a variety of initiatives that contribute to mitigate climate change. Just to name a few, in 2016 we eliminated and prohibited plastic bags, and last year we prohibited plastic straws distribution. We reached to have 100% of our public lighting in LED lighting, and it's very interesting when you arrive to the city by plane, you can really see the color difference from the metro area. There is like a clear border where the LED lighting starts. We also have important policies regarding green spaces and tree planting with an important focus on community and citizen participation. And we have strong policies regarding the priority to walkability and public transportation. We really want the people to leave the car and jump into the public transportation. We have a very good rate of use of public transportation because around 98% of the population has a very good quality public transport, less than 4 blocks away from their homes. So that's quite a good connectivity. Next slide, please. So, however, even if we're doing like a big effort and that you have seen the variety of initiatives that we're moving forward, we still need to work and to do like stronger efforts to achieve carbon neutrality. Buenos Aires signed to be carbon neutral by 2050. And the main areas of concern are transportation and energy. So next slide, please. So focusing specifically on the pillar regarding environment and sustainability, this is again like our vision for the city. We want a sustainable city that seeks to improve the quality of life for its neighbors and is committed to the preservation of its environment and the efficient use of its resources. So I want to show just like a big overview of the most iconic initiatives. If we can move forward, please. Okay, regarding energy, here are some of the planned actions for the next years. First, we're planning on buying directly renewable energy for big users in the city. A very like iconic example is the Opera House in Buenos Aires, the Teatro Colón, which is one of the buildings that it's a big energy user, as you can imagine, and the idea is to buy directly renewable energy for these big users. Also, as Dan York was mentioning, our idea is always to lead by example. That's why you will see many of these planned actions are focused to public buildings. We're planning on having 100% LED lighting in public buildings by 2025. Again, it's quite a challenge, but if you can see the first 3 initiatives, they not only contribute to mitigate climate change, but it's also we can reduce 1% the public spending on energy for the city. So that's quite an interesting thing. Also, we're planning on putting solar energy and green roofs in public buildings, particularly schools. We have a program that is called Green Schools, and the idea is to have green roofs we already have green roofs in many of the schools, to not only to promote and to teach in a different environment, but it's also because of energy efficiency. Regarding housing, we're planning on having energy efficiency labeling in housing. The idea is that with this labeling, the market will be kind of forced to build more efficient buildings because the price of less efficient buildings will definitely go down if we can pass this law. And finally, again, regarding more of a cultural change that we're expecting, the last initiative is focusing on how we manage public buildings and to improve practices and the management of these buildings to be more efficient. Next slide, please. And the other area I wanted to focus on was mobility and what we're planning in this area. So as I mentioned, we have quite a good connectivity in Buenos Aires. We have buses, we have subway, we have BRT, we have bikes, and we have very good connection mobility points. So first, regarding electric buses, we ran a pilot last year for 4 lines, 2 buses per line. Those are buses that start and end their trajectory within the city of Buenos Aires and do not go away to the metro area. The idea is to have 3 full lines, 3 electric full lines by 2023, and those would be lines that go through the business district, which is like the most dense. We also have 5 BRT. Those BRT, some of them do cross the border and go to the metro area, so that's also an interesting point for like metropolitan coordination. And we're planning on having 3 more in the next 4 years. The BRT not only is better for reducing greenhouse emission, but it also improves the time of travel and it gives a quality service to the citizens of Buenos Aires. Regarding bikes, we have a completely free biking system with 400 stations, more than 240 kilometers of bike lanes, and 4,000 bikes. We'll definitely continue working towards improving and increasing the availability of bikes and of bike lanes in the city. And finally, we're starting working on car sharing initiatives that are mainly focused on regulation and on how to regulate the companies that are already providing services in the city, with the idea of reducing uncertainty and making shared mobility an affordable and a friendly user experience for the citizens of Buenos Aires. Both car sharing and carpooling have the idea of, again, not only reducing greenhouse emissions, but to reduce congestion and traffic jams. Buenos Aires does not have the traffic jams or congestion that are common, for example, in Mexico City. But if we do not make like a change of mind, we might be there in some years. So the idea is to reduce car ownership and to increase the number of people that are in one vehicle and not just 1 people per vehicle. But the idea is to have at least 2 per vehicle by 2035. But again, as I was mentioning in the beginning, our main policies are towards increasing walkability, increasing the use of public transportation, and reducing the use of car, both having effects both on greenhouse emissions, but also on the quality of life in Buenos Aires. So basically, this is my presentation. I know we were short on time, so I tried to move forward so we can have some Q&A if we still have time. You can download the Buenos Aires Resilience Strategy in those links, both in the Buenos Aires City Government website or in the 100 Resilient Cities website. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Martina. So we are actually at the end of our time, but I do have a question for you, since you spent quite a bit of time discussing transportation. What, if anything, can be done to address GHG emissions associated with air transportation?
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence? Because
I said, what, if anything, can be done to address GHG emissions associated with air transportation?
Okay, that's a big thing, basically because the airport it's shared between the city. I mean, it's in the city, but it's national competence. So from the city, it's quite a big challenge to address. That's why we're focusing on what we can do from the city, basically regarding clean transportation, as I mentioned, with electric buses and electric cars. We're thinking of an exemption, a tax exemption for electric cars for the next years to increase electric cars in the city, but we're still not at that point because we need to first increase the number of stations, of charging stations in the city. So that's why we're particularly focusing again on walkability, on building more walkable areas, banning the car from the city center. That's another important policy, and BRT basically.
From a city and county of Honolulu perspective, this is air transportation is obviously a really it's our connection to the continent, to North America. It's our supply of tourist dollars. So it's a really challenging and important thing to look at. We actually made the decision just this year to sort of redo our inventory to make sure that we captured all of the emissions that we were responsible for in this area, so that we would not lose sight of that important goal. But obviously, engine efficiency in air, in jets, as well as fuel switching, biofuels, is sort of the direction that I think things are going. But it's clearly a challenge.
Thanks very much, Rocky and Martina, and to Dan and Alex as well. So since we've gone over time, we've been collecting questions, but we're not going to have time to address them. If you would like to email Dan or Alex about the report, you can go ahead and do that. And then, as I said, we collected the questions so we can get back to people individually to help answer them. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining today's webinar. We will be sharing the slides and sending a recording to all the registrants in the next day or two. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.